Welcome to week 2 of my game engine project. This week I've been working on a file explorer so you can pick models from the editor, and you can also move and scale those models thanks to our entity component system. Okay, so I went about implementing a file explorer like this one from a repo by this guy, Gallic Gunner. It's really good. This is exactly what I wanted. The reason for me recreating this is twofold. So the first reason why I tried to do it in I'mGUI is because that to use the Windows File Explorer, that would make the engine platform dependent, right? You can have other platforms working with it, like Linux and Mac, if you have like this platform abstraction in the editor. I'm not that far along yet. There wouldn't have been any problem me doing that, but I didn't want to include one of the libraries that uses that's used for what was it? It's like It's not WinForms. Maybe it's something else. Like anyway, it's one of the Microsoft UI dependencies. I didn't really want it in the editor, honestly. So I was like, let's have a look around. I found this repo. This looked really good, exactly what I wanted. I tried to. It's written for C++ because I'mGUI's written for C++ and C. I think just C++ actually. Um, but I couldn't. It's only one file, but I was having trouble compiling it into a DLL that I could like use. I would still have to create bindings, and that seemed like a lot of effort. So what I ended up doing was writing it myself again, using this as a reference in C sharp. I did have a look for already implemented versions in C sharp, but there wasn't any about. So I thought this would be a good project to tack onto the side. I can release this in a repo just like this person has done for C sharp and maybe help the community grow around BGFX, that like the C sharp bindings for the libraries I'm using, I'mGUI.net and BGFX. So yeah, there were the two motives for doing it. I guess you could say it was a waste of time, which a lot of people would say. They'd just be like, include the library and just use Microsoft's version. But I didn't really know a lot about I'mGUI, so I learnt loads like implementing this. I had a reference to go off, so I went off this GIF and looked at the source code from this library. So yeah, I think it turned out well. So I'll show you that now. So here we are in the engine, and as you can see, I have the bunny from last time loaded, but it's not spinning. And the reason it's not spinning is because it's now connected to this model. If I remove this model, I can't remove the model because for some reason. Okay, that's fine. Whatever, a bug. But so yeah, it's not spinning because it's connected to the model, and the transforms actually work, right? So I can scale this down, and you can see that it's actually connected. So yeah, I got the buttons working with I'mGUI. That was really easy to do that. Anyway, I'm rambling. So here is the modal window file explorer that I created for this. So at the minute you can see that it kind of scales the same way. The file system isn't exactly the same, but it's close enough. You can go all the way down into like something. You can see that it scrolls instead of goes sideways, so it goes vertical, which is fine. We've got all the different things that are there. It filters it on the file extension. You can also filter from this BGFX, and it brings up whatever. So yeah, that's pretty good. The implementation of this I'll show now, but in essentially how it works is, let's just stop running this. Essentially you just call the, where was it used? Sorry, I can't remember now. Properties window, where's that? Here. Okay, so you just have a no, it's not here. It's in, sorry, it's in the component layouts. you have a file dialog. This is what it is. It's a file dialog. This is used here. So you call the draw function. You pass it a file mode, which essentially just changes the text at this point. You can give it a path of where it should start from. Then here you pass in an action essentially that takes in a string. Oh, okay, so yeah, sorry, you don't pass in a path. You could pass in a path, I think, in some other function. But anyway, you create an action that takes a string, right? Because when you press the open or the save button, it will pass the string to this action through this variable, right? So in this component, which is the model component, you select the model and then it loads the model using our async loader. You could also specify the extensions that you're allowed to open with it. So it won't try and open a text file and pass a text file in here and it will break. So yeah, I just put fbx obj and blend in for now. So yeah, I think that's really clean way of doing it. Passing in an action. It's essentially the same as a callback. It's just you pass the action in instead of like giving it another method down here. I mean, actually, if I just wrote another function like this that took a string in, it would work the same way because I could just reference it there and put this code down there. Maybe that's cleaner. It's probably cleaner than having it inline because it's a bit messy here in a function call. But yeah, so that's that. Okay, so how did I get the model scaling and moving is the next question, right? So this is one of the things that I kept when I decided to do a revamp. I kept it because when I created this project, it's called Iris, is essentially the entity component system of the game engine. I guess at the minute it's just entity component because there's no systems implemented, but I created this, and when I made it, I have like this real nice suite of unit tests that I wrote at the same time. So it was like super nice and compartmentalized, encapsulated real nicely. The design that I chose, on the other hand, was questionable. So to start with, I had everything as structs. Now this was a really good idea, and one that I want to go back to because structs are a value type and classes are a reference type, which will impact performance later down the line when we want to grab all of our components, give them to the CPU to do computation on. We want them all to be on contiguous memory, which value types are in, right? Because they can be stored on the stack, or an array would be stored on the heap because it's a reference type, but all the memory would be contiguous. Now, if we had if we had an array of classes, which are reference types, the references would be in contiguous memory, but the actual values of those references would be scattered around over in memory in the heap, which would not be very performant. So initially I went for structs, which I want to go back to, but I was having trouble with some callbacks with the ImGUI. I just didn't know they existed, honestly. Like, I wanted to change, essentially when I went to change the name of an entity, I'd have to remove the component and re-add it again, because it's not passed by reference, right? So that I was just editing the local value of that component, but it wasn't being reflected into the array that was stored on the entity. So yeah, so I just kind of like thought, whatever, we'll change it to classes for now. We can change it back later. It's actually not that big of a deal to change it. So it's just this, and then I would change all the other things. Yeah, so we can get the components off them. We can add and remove components. These are all try, which is done because obviously you don't want it to blow up if you can't do it. You want it to give you a bool So that the convention with a try method is you do try something, so replace component. In this case, you return a bool whether it was successful or not, and you give your output. So on a get try, okay, get all components isn't a try get component. You give your output component in an out parameter in the method signature. So that's kind of the idea there. But yeah, so they're all stored in dictionaries, which oh, it's a dictionary in a dictionary, which people will probably laugh at because yeah, it's not great. They are stored as I components. So before I had this component container, because if you used an interface with your components, which I want to do, it does this thing called boxing. So even if they were a structure, it would box the structure and essentially hold a reference to it, which has a performance hit because you're doing boxing is an action that's taken out, and then you're losing the performance gain that you get from it being a structure. So not that great. So that's why I had this other component container. We might go back to it because I liked that system. It was just a bit difficult to do this one thing at the bottom. So get entities with components. So when I started using this, I realized that I hadn't actually fulfilled what I wanted it to do when I created it. So I would want to get entities with all of the transform components and all of the mesh components, right? So to phrase that in a better way, I want entities that have transform and model components on them, because that's what I need to render. If you just have an entity with a model component, I can't render that because I don't know the scale of it, I don't know the position of it. Yeah, I can't render that. So I want to get items from those two different buckets, things that are contained in those buckets. I think you understand that. I'm probably rambling a little bit, but yeah. So that was one thing that I hadn't implemented. I knew I hadn't because I left this comment back when I wrote it, whenever that was, probably August or something. Yeah, so I implemented that. That was actually easier. It's probably not that efficient. But yeah, but because I had all of these tests written, it was super easy, and I was really confident about the changes that I made. So that was really nice. And it worked. I just plugged it in, wrote this little method, got all the components, and drew the models. So that was really nice. Okay, so one of the last other things that I did last week was loading materials. So at the minute, the bunny that you see on the screen, it's just given a flat color everywhere in the shader. So you can't see the shape of it because there's no lighting detail to tell you what it looks like. So this week I have done a bit on loading the textures from the materials from the asset scene. They're all loaded into memory. They're just not passed to the shader to texture the object. I also want to try and do some lighting stuff, get lighting, maybe just global illumination, like flat lighting everywhere, done. Also want to do something on loading and saving of scenes, because that'll allow me to have nice test scenes, right? So that's another thing. At the minute, I've been going along very fast, right? Not really taking much thought into the tests that I've been writing, because honestly, I've only written a couple of tests, and that was for the entity component system. So this is like one of the classes that would be really good to test, because I could bring out this material stuff. Like it's got a load of other responsibilities, like creating vertex buffers. That could be done by a factory, and then you could pass it in, and it'd just be a lot easier to test. So I might make a video on refactoring this class, just to show you how I'd go about refactoring code that might not be the best to start with. Yeah, because to be fair, at work we do TDD, which is test-driven development, which is like you have your specification, you write your tests first, and then you write your code as quick as you can to get it to pass, And then once all the tests are passing and your code does what you want it to do, then you refactor it into a nicer form. Obviously, refactoring can be as easy as hard as you make it on your first pass around, right? Because you might have pre-existing ideas that you want to try, but the idea is that if those ideas don't work out, it's fine because you've got your test passing. You can then know that your tests work and are safe, right? And then you can refactor in it and have confidence that code that you refactored into works as well. So yeah, so this would be, I think this would be a good place to showcase that kind of idea, because there's stuff that needs to be pulled out of here. So this has more than one responsibility, and it'd be a nice little exercise to do. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else I've done this week. So have a good one, and thanks for watching.